Ready to start? Okay.
So what's the next big town to compete with you? Is it for the south? South? Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to get started.
Okay.
My name is Dr. Mujahid Yahuma. I'm the Vice President for Delaware African Coalition. And this is our first educational program dealing with community, diversity, and Pan-Africanism. And we've been an organization that's been around about 7 years. And this is the first time we actually had an education program specifically devoted to unity and Pan-Africanism among all us Africans, Kenya, Nigeria, Jamaica, Guyana, America. So how do you bring all these people together, right? And so this is the reason why we have our speaker today, to help provide the foundation for us to be able to work together in terms of what it means to be an African and to be Pan-African. And so I'll run through the program. We'll have libations of Dr. Kimani. Then we'll have introduction of the Delaware Global Africa Center program series in terms of the education series by Kevin Coleman. Then we have the Global African Center Purpose and Diversity and Differences Among Africans, Dr. Kenichi Lawrence. Then we have introduction of the guest speaker, Dr. Pettiford, introduce the guest speaker. That's the run of the show. And then we'll open up for questions after he does his presentation. Presentation will be no more than about 35, 40 minutes. We hope to have a lot of interaction in terms of people asking questions, okay? Okay, without further ado, have our libations of Dr. Kimani Nehusi. Do you have everything you need?
So far, so good.
All right.
I think everybody knows what a libation is, even though you don't know that you know it. This is the original form of prayers and sacrifice and offering. Still survives in the Caribbean and in the diaspora. Sometimes when you see elders opening water around, they sip some onto the floor, and you must be aware, younger people, I was looking at them, Tupac and Nas, pour out a little liquor and so on. So this is anonymous, but it's one of those things we need to reclaim because certain people have banished that kind of cultural expression on us. And we no longer know that this is an elaborate ritual and what it means. So, my book on libation is there, available from purchase. Small books. We usually begin by saluting and invoking the Creator. So, for the Creator, divinity, or God, our people have known first and have known it by different names in the different places that we have resided and have been made to reside. For all the lesser divinity. So, our glorious ancestors. So, okay, thank you very much. Every time I pour, you could tell by saying Ashe, which is a Yoruba word that means let it be so, power, or something like that. In different African languages, they have similar words for the same thing. But Ashe has been popularized in the diaspora.
African American.
In the diaspora, in Europe, people say Ashe.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. So, for our ancestors who have become known, distinctive in the fight for our people. Sure. And I want you to help me for a brief moment here. I'll say one name and you say other names. And I would mention the name Malcolm X.
Sure.
You could mention your ancestors, the direct ancestors.
One now, I think it's our time to look at Burmese and Quebec, Wheeler. Those are how.
And for all the other fighters, whose names are too many to recall now, probably I don't remember also that where it's coming out. Boredom.
The Mumbai.
I also pour for the mountains, the springs, the rivers, the trees, and all aspects of the environment. Our people were the first environmentalists in this world. We practiced it for 1,000 years. We were environmentalists before environmentalism. Actually, now we come one minute occasion. We invoke all of those presences, the spirits, so that they could help us to understand what we're about to do. We put that and we impeach them to give us clarity, to give us the correct levels of dedication and determination so that we could achieve the purpose for which we have assembled here this evening. Usually, at the end, you pour much more. This will become a communal cup, and you pass it around. In case you're wondering where communion comes from.
Okay. Where I come from, they use gin.
Yeah. But in Africa, in the west coast of Africa, and in the diaspora, we usually use strong rum, and it's usually white. But if you go to the other parts of Africa, they would use anything, and in ancient Egypt, they used any liquid, including beer. Yes, they had beer here. Forward to you.
All right, thank you very much. All right. Okay, now we'll have Kevin Coleman, Chair of the TR Committee, talk about the education programs for Delaware Global Africa Center.
So, good evening, family. Good evening. I'm Kevin Coleman. I'm the Chair of the Public Relations Committee for Delaware Africa Coalition, and I'm privileged, and my mind is going to be the shortest of the conversation of this, but I'm privileged to be able to just kind of take today to give you a glimpse into the future, because the program that we're providing here today is really being housed here, but it's in the series of a program that we expect to continue to offer the community at the Delaware Global African Center. If you haven't heard about the Delaware Global African Center, this is the opportunity to learn more about it. Before April ends, you can feel free to grab you on the side to make sure that you get a copy. And if you downloaded the program, if you registered for today, if you downloaded this program, you get a chance to learn a little bit about Delaware Africa Coalition and the Delaware Global African Center. This is the first in that series. You're going to be seeing more. So I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of, see this as not the end, but the beginning of an opportunity to start to bring real education, real insight, and real engagement to the community, to our program. So enjoy.
And Dr. Kalichi Lawrence, President of the Delaware African Coalition, he will talk about the Global Africa Center purpose and diversity and differences among Africans.
Okay, good evening. Good evening. Okay, they said I have 5 minutes to kill. Okay, it's actually reduced to all the time to cut, which is fine. So I want to welcome you, my brother. I'm certainly looking forward to the things that you're going to do here, which is really sort of, in my mind, a reflection of the things that we should be doing, the reason why we are trying to build a place to do it too. So that's a model there. That's not the building, it's a model. Some of the things that you see there, hopefully you have an opportunity to read about some of the things, not all of them, that are planned for the center. So you may wonder to yourself, why are you doing a center? When you were talking to Jeffrey, he said something about, in the Caribbean, we have this, in the village, people of a certain age would know that a child belongs not only to the parents, but to who? to everybody, right? So you not only parent your own child, you parent who? Everybody. And then you said something which was kind of disappointing, right? You said what?
We lost it.
We've lost it. That we've lost it. We've become individualistic. Not only for the child. None of us was born with gray hair. Were you born with gray hair?
No.
You started as a child, right? All right. So what you didn't do for the child, the adult doesn't have. Okay? And so I say that to put in the context of what the organization Delaware Africa Coalition is really all about. So, and why we are building the Delaware Global African Center. So as the name suggests, Delaware Africa Coalition is a coalition of people of African descent in the diaspora, continental Africans, Caribbean Africans, of course, African Americans. When we started, we recognized that we are very different culturally. We've been socialized differently. We've been deceived differently by different people in whose interest it was that we didn't know much about each other and didn't work together with each other. And that is actually continuing right now. And so I say that to say to you that when we started, we were not delusional about the fact that just because you're black, you know what you're supposed to know, because most people actually don't. So with that in mind, you have to consciously and deliberately say to people, yes, I know you look like me, but maybe your idea of the world is different from mine, and that's okay. Can we come together and teach each other, educate each other in ways that we can maybe work together better? Because that's actually what other people do. The Caucasians who have deliberately divided us, I don't know about, some of you here I'm sure know, about the Berlin Conference of 1884. Okay? If you don't know, here's what happened. So, the people who said that they were going to develop Africa, got there, they were taking resources. This one will take this one, put it over here. I won't take that, I'll put it over there. I won't take that, I'll put it over. So you put this over here. This one will come and do what? Steal from you. Okay? Then everybody will steal from them. And they were fighting against each other for the resources that belong to who? African. And then, as that was going on, then that created conflict among them. What did they do? They said, no, we can't have this conflict going. Come on. Why don't we come together, decide to work together, partner together, look for ways to work together in win-win, whatever, right? So they decided then, all right, okay, you take charge of over here, you take charge of over there. Whatever you see over here belongs to you. Whatever you see over there belongs to you. This was 1885. How many years ago is that? A lot of years, right? So I'm saying to us, as we sit here today, I ask some of us, even the way we interact with each other today, this one wants to be over here, that one wants to be over there, that one wants to be over there. I'm talking 2025. And I'm talking to people in this room. 1885, these people saw a reason to do what? Come together so that they can completely and fully exploit us. They are still doing that. The Asians are doing their own. These people are doing it. The people who are not doing it are who? Us. Okay. So the 3 minutes I was given is gone. But part of the reason we want to build institutions, you need to build institutions if you want to maintain your cultural traditions and history. You need to build institutions. Some of us do not understand that. That's part of what we're doing. Is it easy? No. Nothing good is easy. But that's what we want to do. So I'm certainly happy about the educational series that is kicking off. I just gave you a teaser, so to speak. There is a lot more that we can tell you. The center is supposed to be a community gathering place. You, first and foremost, want people to come, black, white, blue, whatever. Because then when people come together, they have an opportunity to share with them the messages that you need to share with them. you can educate them. And from there, hopefully they can begin to make the changes that need to be made in order to sustain us long term. So with that, I'm going to stop. Then just in time, you know, listen to him.
Okay. Next, we have Dr. Keith Pettiford, who's chair of the Delaware African and Caribbean Affairs Commission. He's going to introduce our speaker, turn the right of his fight.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. First, I want to thank Dr. Mujahid and Commissioner Sherry Walker for bringing this information to your commission, so I definitely appreciate and bless. Dr. Kimani Nehusi attended the St. Bartholomew's Anglican School in his village of Queenstown on the Essequibo Island coast in Guyana and holds the BA and MA from the University of Guyana, a PhD from the University of College of London, and a diploma in Egyptology from the University of London, where he also undertook advanced studies in Egyptology, including advanced translation of Middle and Late Egyptian texts. He graduated from the Center of Brazilian Studies and completed a one-year graduate program in Education Research Methodology at the Ministry of Education in Guyana. Nehusi is also a fellow of the Higher Education Academy in the UK. Nehusi has been assistant examiner in the Caribbean examinations and lectured, conducted workshops, gave keynotes, and contributed to radio and television programs in many communities, colleges, universities, and workplaces in various parts of the Caribbean, USA, Canada, Europe, specifically UK, Holland, Germany, Sweden, and Denmark, and Africa, specifically Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa. He held positions in universities of Guyana, London, East London, founded and was director of the Africa Studies Center at the University of East London, and is currently research associate at the Institute for Economic Research on Innovation, Shawani University of Technology, South Africa, associate professor in the Department of Africology at Temple University in the USA, and Walter Rodney Professor of History at the University of Guyana. A member of community organizations in his village from his teens, he is one of the founders of the First of August movement and the Ruralities Athletic Club in Buxton, East Coast, Demerara, in Guyana. The Addicts Athletic Club in Georgetown, Guyana, and Africa Liberation Support Campaign, Pan-African Grassroots Educational Network, and the African United Action Front in London, UK. He remains a member of the Queenstown, New York Association. He has represented Guyana in track and field, has been National Track and Field Coach of Guyana, held offices in the Amateur Athletic Association of Guyana, was placed on the International Amateur Athletic Associate or Federation's panel of international lecturers, and was honored by the IAAF for his services to track and field in Guyana. A multidisciplinary scholar with strong interest in language and linguistics, history, culture, and research methodology. Professor Nehusi's research interests include Africa and its diasporas from ancient to modern times, the Caribbean, and Guyana. He received many honors from different parts of the world for his scholarship. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Kimani Nehusi.
I was hoping y'all would keep clapping. You only have 5 minutes for me to talk. That would be a good way of getting out of it. But thanks for the very warm welcome. I'm always pleased and indeed excited when our people get together to talk about ourselves. I think it's a very important thing for us to remember that unless we take charge of our affairs, they're not going to be run well. So, without any further ado, let me launch into this lecture today, you said I have an hour and a half. 3 hours. It's 30 minutes, right?
Typical Guyanese. Devin.
I want to begin by congratulating the Delaware Africa Coalition and the Delaware Africa Commission Affairs and other organizations who, I don't remember all the names, for bringing us together on this occasion. I also want to congratulate you on the topic, the African in you. There are other things there that we're going to get into, but the African in you is extremely important because many of us have been mis-socialized into the belief that we are not Africans. And hopefully, by the end of this lecture, we're going to have some ideas that should contest that.
Ashe.
We need, at a very peculiar moment, if I might say so, in the history of our people and the history of this world. There are all challenges that face our people. Miseducation, self-hate, the ravages of colonialism and neocolonialism. But there are new opportunities also. And whether our boat sinks or sails depends upon us and how we understand this moment in the history of the world. We are an underdeveloped people, and that word underdeveloped should be recognized as an active process directed by people. It is not by accident that we are underdeveloped, and I'll hopefully come back to that. But we face a declining empire. We live here, we've assembled here in a declining empire, the United States Empire, which has succeeded British Empire, which succeeded the French, which succeeded the Spanish, which succeeded the Portuguese, all in the last 600 years of Western European domination. Their time is ending, and you're seeing several consequences and symptoms of this decline. One of the ghosts, phantoms, the things that the ruling elites of the West are deadly scared of is BRICS. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They have expanded. But the important thing to understand about BRICS Plus is that they're no longer prepared to be bossed around. We could go into this if you want to, but this is a whole area that I think we need to understand. Part of what BRICS has proposed, but not only BRICS is doing this now, is de-dollarization. The whole Bretton Woods Agreement, United Nations, World Bank, IMF, and later on US aid, all of these vagabond vampire institutions are on the way out. People are challenging them. And this is a moment that we've never seen in the history of the world. And again, how we understand this environment is going to be important for how our people negotiate things that are coming. But de-dollarization is one of those things, the growing integration in regional trade, communication links. I mean, we could easily exhaust today and tomorrow talking about this. It's so important, but there's a lot going on. And I have to quote Prophet Muhammad. People think they're living in heaven, but they're living in hell. And I say that because some of the elites have this hubris, this belief that they're always right and they're superior and so on. They can't get out of it. So even while the ship is sinking, they're drinking wine and believing that it was all times. There's an increasing knowledge and a rising consciousness to magic among African people, especially. It's happening in other parts of the world, but the most striking part of this is among African people, and we have witnessed some of this in this country. And a lot of that rides on the democratization of information. Many of us went to school and weren't taught anything about ourselves. I'm going to come to that too. But recently, in the last couple of years, more and more information about Africa and its history and culture and so on has become available. They could no longer control the information. And I said, we have witnessed this. The murder of George Floyd was popularized because a young African-American woman used her cell phone to record it. That's how it got into the digital stream of many of the young people and then other people. So CNN and NBC and so on, they had to talk about it because they could no longer ignore it as they would have done before. Right? So that's a significant shift. And most of all, a symptom, one important symptom of the declining empire is the American Inquisition in this digital age. The attack upon DEI. I mean, why shouldn't our people learn our history? And it's... Thank you. It's important that we understand what's going on. If you know who you are, nobody could make you a fool. If you know who you are, you would know what your interests are. Jen, please. You're going to spot those interests. You're going to work out ways of defending them and of advancing them. Right? There's a lot we could talk about here. So the people who try to keep us down, read them carefully. They're evil, but they're not stupid. They know very clearly that if we come to know our history, they wouldn't sleep well. I mean, sure. Okay? We're going to see more of this. Today we want to talk about some important concepts like Pan-Africanism, which has already been mentioned, identity, world order, colonialism, neo-colonialism, agriculture. This is the most important question in the world. Anybody. Who are you? I said, if you don't know who you are, you won't know what your interests are. Who are you? You, all of us, have seen some of the damning evidence of this. I know a brilliant guy, gifted. He was a brain surgeon. But he was confused. Didn't know who he was. But he does. Yeah, you get it. He was secretary in housing. In the last Trump administration, should I go down to Mars? There's another one, he's a general disaster in the U.S. Army. Should I go more? You see, if we acquire knowledge, skills, and that kind of thing, training, and we do not use the knowledge and the skills and the training in the interest of our people, then you'll have to call us traitors. It's thinner. And a traitor isn't necessarily somebody who is actively working against their own people. You could not become involved. If you're not involved, then you're not working for your people. And when our people invented education thousands of years ago in Kemet, education was always tied to the interests of the community. So it's important that we understand that we must not allow our generations to acquire knowledge and skills, but a knowledge of self. So this talks to the appropriateness of education and training. If we want to be educated and trained, if that education and training has to meet the learning needs of our people. And a big gap in our learning needs is self-knowledge. We don't know who we are as African people. Some of us even recoil when you call them African. But that we will come to that. I put up. Am I okay here? Yeah, that's probably okay.
You can work here.
I put up something here. What became of the black people of Stuna? Traveler asked the old man. For ancient records show that the people of Stuna were black. What happened to them? The old man died. They lost their history. And so they died. You see many people, they look like us. They talk like you, but they're not us. There is a foreign virus in their computer. It's a brain. In the brain or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. So they don't think for themselves. They're controlled.
Yep.
And this is serious. And we could hopefully go into some of this. Some of us are controlled, and we do not understand that we are controlled. We don't see it, and we can't see it unless somebody else points it out to us. And even then, there are mechanisms that are triggered, and we deny reality. Do you know this woman? It's the. That's it. So, a woman came, Peran, from ancient Egypt. She's doing libation. But she could walk in here, and y'all know. Because she's one of us. She's your auntie, your mother, your grandma, the lady walking down the street. You know what this guy is? That's the Harka, Uncle Taharka, from Nubia, who marched up into Quebec and said, hey, you got to restore things here. Y'all get too watered down by foreigners. Build back this thing. Taharka. You know who this is? Any medical doctors here? This is one of the first medical doctors in the world known. The first multi-genius. He wasn't only a medical doctor, he was an architect, he was an engineer, and he was prime minister of ancient Egypt. His name is Imhotep. A name that means he who comes in peace. Hotep is peace, or satisfied ancient Egyptian. This guy wrote books, textbooks, that Hippocrates studied from 1,500 years after Imhotep became an ancestor. But you won't know that, because certain people wouldn't tell you that. We've got to recover our history for ourselves, not a whole lot about Imhotep and his truth. These people, many of them were based in Kemet, ancient Egypt. And I want to spend 1 minute locating Kemet for us. Kemet is the most known and most celebrated flower from the African tree. But it's not the only or even the first bloom from that tree. There were countries before Kemet. Okay? Fact is, my last publication came out not too long ago. It is about how the people of Kemet said that they come from the south, from inner Africa. And they buried the navel string and the placenta. Yeah, some of you will know about that. That's how far back it goes. Yeah. And they did these things while pointing to the south. That's where they come from, inner Africa. So places like Uganda, the Great Lakes and so on, there's a place called the Mountains in the Moon. Ancient Egyptians mentioned that. Okay? But ancient Egypt became the foremost society in the world for over 3,000 years. Ancient Egypt led the world. No people have done that before or after. So ancient Egypt is a tremendous example. Ancient Egyptians invented civilization, science, building and construction. Think about the pyramids. Nobody has surpassed the pyramids until very recently, and they were built thousands of years ago. Medicine, education, the first universities were built in ancient Egypt. Female divinities. Ancient Egyptians, like all African people who remain African, have respect for women. And they were female gods, goddesses in ancient Egypt. And this goes before ancient Egypt because many of the goddesses worshipped in ancient Egypt, female as well as male, came from before ancient Egypt, deeper in Africa. We don't have time to go into all of those, but I just wanted to make that marker. Anybody recognizes this? Good. Let me put on. This is from ancient Egypt. And we could easily spend a day explaining this. But I put it up because I wanted to make this point. Those of us who say we're Christians, this is where Christianity comes from. Ancient Egyptian. Again, if you have a day or two to spare, we'll begin to talk with that, right? But this is Judgment Day, thousands of years before Christianity, right? This guy is weighing the heart. Yes, they had scales and weight, right? You would read a book and they would tell him, is it invented the scale? Just give me a place to stand up and have it, Long before his inventor, African people were using his invention. Something rock in Polish people. And then that's Nehusi, he's writing. Ancient Egyptians invented writing and therefore reading. Okay? And there you have a judgment. The king of the underworld, as Europeans put it. Okay? And if there was a test, if you underwent the test, you would say Ma'akeru, which in ancient Egyptian means literally true or false. But it means like the justified death. Somebody was resurrected. And somebody comes from there. I could show you endless passages in the Bible that comes from this book, the book of Pret M. Heru. Europeans mistranslated and called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day. This is purely primitive, childish, nonsensical translation. Really means the book of finding resurrection or obtaining resurrection. And a lot of Western philosophy is based upon the writings of our ancestors in there. And I sort of ask us to consider this two wisdom sayings. The beginning of wisdom is going who you are. I guess we get that by now. And if you know the beginning well, the end will not trouble you. A lot of us do something that is akin to reading a book of 30 chapters, but we begin at chapter 25, and we think we got the whole story. How many of us really know the history of our people? I'm not saying you must go to school and get a PhD in it. You must know. You must have an idea that African people were the first people in the world. We invented humanity, civilization. We did all kinds of things. And people have deliberately tried to miseducate us into the belief that our people have done nothing. And the reason for that is because they want to justify their own barbarism. Read the history of Europe. It was sheer murder, nastiness. We could go into that if you want to. And these are the people who try to tell us that they're exactly the opposite to what they were. And we believe that nonsense because we don't go any better. When Europeans first went to Africa, they sent back reports saying this is such a beautiful place. It's clean, it's orderly. One of the so-called explorers, he got hit with cholera or malaria, something like that. He was delirious. An African woman took him in and cared him for 3 months. When he recovered himself, all his goods were around him. You know what that woman said? These people are stupid. They didn't steal my stuff. It tells you about values, right? We need to understand that kind of stuff. Decide. I don't think we need to explain this anymore. A lot of us confuse citizenship with identity. Nobody should refuse to participate in the civil life of the United States. Take your own point of view, of course. But do not believe that because you're a citizen of America, you're not an African. You're confusing two concepts. You're confusing citizenship with identity. The Chinese, some of them never even speak Chinese. So they have no doubt that they're Chinese. And we could go on and on and on. But we're confused. We don't even want to be called African. And we don't even know what being an African is. Well, if we're going to make ourselves into anything, we've got to change that attitude. Come to some more of that. We relate to the world through our senses. And the point I want to make here is that we have the so-called sixth sense the psychologists will talk about. But this is actually racial memory. Do you know that all human beings have an African memory card? Yeah, think about it. Humanity evolved in Africa. The oldest part of the human brain evolved in Africa. So it's wired with responses to an African environment. When Freud and Young started doing research on that, and they realized it's an African part of the brain that they were dealing with, they shut it down. They themselves admitted that they were too racist to carry forward it. Right? And that's why our people could do certain things without even thinking. Yeah, so, you put a whole lot of people in a room and you start playing music. Before the second bar, the African already in shoes. Without thinking. That's a blessing. It's not anything bad. But causing somebody from down the street, what's your name? That takes 3 years and she still ain't getting it. About these are facts. Okay? It's no coincidence that African people usually dominate coordination and speed and height, and we're talking about sports. Wherever we are permitted to rise, we rise. And it's the same thing in anything else. Think about how many of our people have invented so many things in the most oppressive circumstances. Do you know that even the most racist white person has to salute the flag, the colors of Africa? You know that? It happens every day. red, gold, and green. You drive up to the traffic lights.
I was wondering where you're going.
Do you know why? It's a product we meant.
Yeah.
Right in the success, right? Right,
So, that should be.
yes. Yep. Give me the run, please. So, first, I mean, that's only one example. Again, we could spend the entire evening just talking about how old people have invented so much refrigeration truck, the filament to make the bulb born, the layout of Washington D.C. And let's move off of that because it's another huge area for us to understand. Okay, the South. I want to beat this drum about self-knowledge. The self is the first person you will begin to know is you. Okay? Your individual self, your collective self is very important. Your family, your community, your people, you know. And this is where identity begins to get important. If any aspect of this is defective, you're in trouble. Okay? You'll be a general disaster or a clinical one. You will need brain surgery. Even if you're a brain surgeon. So, know yourself. It's true. Knowledge is powerful. But the most significant and greatest kind of knowledge is self-knowledge. And by self-knowledge, I don't only mean know yourself as an individual, you know. It's my thing I could get up in the midnight and study or do whatever. You know, you begin to understand your own, say, idiosyncrasies. I hope that's a big word. Right? But you also have to know your people. Okay? That's a very important part of self-knowledge also. We are not one. Our culture from the earliest time has been collective. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? And again, we could go into many hours of education on this. Just look at Russia and China. Right? Do you know why all of a sudden they've come and they're eclipsing the United States? They didn't enslave anybody. You know, they were going at this. Russia started just about 100 years ago with their revolution. And they endured a whole lot of destruction. Yet by 1960, they put the first Sputnik in the sky. They put the first human being in the sky, Yuri Gagarin. They put the first woman in the sky, Valentina Tereshkova, in space. You know, look what the Chinese are doing. Part of the reason for their success is that they had a collectivist approach to things. And you see that here, but you don't recognize it. Who saved High Street and neglected? No, who saved Wall Street and neglected High Street? Right? The elites were given, and they're still being given stuff. You know, that's a collectivist approach to their welfare against the interests of the welfare of the great majority of people in this country. Right? What's the bill? It's another aspect of that. We talked about this already, okay? And just remember that the civilizations you know as the Indus Valley, in Sumer, in Mesopotamia, these are all African. Africans started there. And Africans started civilization in other places also. Now, we've got some guidance in answering this question, but it's an important one. You know, Peter Tosh, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African. Please listen to that. That's important guidance. You know. And Kwame Nkrumah, or Sajifo Kwame Nkrumah, he said, I'm not an African because I was born in Africa. I'm an African because Africa was born in me. Now you know why you could get into children so quickly. Right? And there are many other things that mark our people. Doesn't matter who we are, where we are. Once you're an African, you have certain common responses to your environment. We're going to see some of that. So, what's Pan-Africanism? Well, Pan-Africanism is African people working together in our own interests. Look around the world. What's the Chinese Revolution about? It's Chinese from inside China, outside China, different Chinese working together. It's the same with the Russians. The United States, the ruling elites, they work together. Europe, they're working together, the ruling elites. The difference between Europe and the United States and those other countries is that in these places you have a small number of very rich people who've ripped off everybody else for generations. And they tend to work for them, for themselves, and neglect other people. I mean, the current bill that's going through the United States houses, you know, is a good example. I mean, people are seeing difficult times, but yet you have a bill that will relieve people of more money and put more money in the pockets of the people who can't even count the money they had. And this is evil, and we have to call it by that name. You know, they have deindustrialized this country because they want to make $1 more and a penny more by shipping industrial processes to China and now Vietnam and so on, where they could pay workers less. But it's going to catch up in them. But don't let's go there. We have the same culture. And I disagree with my friend who said that we have different cultures. We have the same culture, but once we remain African. But there are variations. And we mustn't be fooled by the variations. It's not because somebody's nation language is Jamaican and somebody else's is Bajan or Guyanese that we are so different from each other. Think of the southern United States and northern United States. Let's be clear. To me, one of the most amazing things is how African people have remained so much of ourselves. Remember, we go back thousands of years. Time, as well as the space in which we've lived and have been made to live, space and time are purveyors of difference, of dissolution. Yet, we remain a whole lot, we retain a whole lot of our culture. And I think that rediscovering our culture, understanding our culture, is an important basis for the rediscovery of ourselves as a single group of people with many manifestations in our common cultural principles. So again, people talk about this. You know, ancient Egyptian names are the same, identical sometimes, as modern African names. Is this a good marker? And take this. I do have permission to write on this.
Oh, yes, please. Well, it's a bit actually covered more written out. So I do want to just all written up. So I checked on that before.
Could I write here?
That I guess you could. Yeah, funny on. We think it.
Could I write here at the back?
Yeah.
Okay, just need to write in back. No. All right, you'll clear it up. Okay? I'm going to play a trick on people.
So then,
Do you know that? Before you could tell me no, I'm telling you yes, you know it. You don't know the writing, the script. This is the first script invented by human beings, by our ancestors. It's ancient Egyptian, they called it Medu Neter. Right? This is Ra. This is F and then A. And that's Ka. But because this is the name of a divinity, our spirituality was expressed in everything we did. So you write the name of the divinity first, although you would pronounce it last. So this name is, you put an S before a term to make it like a causative, they call it. So this is San Ka Ra. Sound familiar? Sankara?
yeah.
Do you know Sankara was the name of a pharaoh?
True.
But you know Thomas Sankara? Right? If you know the Malian womanist singer, Sangari,
Sankara.
yeah, same name. But the French influence in the orthography, the pronunciation, has changed it a bit. Today you have Tauri. Who did? He overthrew another military guy. Who did that military guy overthrow? His name is Kabari. It's an ancient Egyptian name. And you see these things throughout Africa. We usually don't know who we are. Okay? So I'm saying that we have a common culture. We know Barbarian, most people here would know Barbarian navel string and placenta and plantar shape. It's all over. Okay? Again, we see this in ancient Egypt. It's all over Africa. So we need to pay attention to our commonalities in culture. Very often you have the same idea, but somebody or some people might express it a bit differently from others. That don't make us different. Not because your people do this, like the ritual on the Monday, and another group of people do the same ritual on a Tuesday. That day is so different. And this is very, very important. In the early 90s, in South Africa, Azania, Xhosa and Zulu were murdering each other on the Eastern Cape. Do you know that those people's languages, they're mutually intelligible? Because Xhosa is really Zulus who moved down south and picked up some of the cliques from the Khoisan people in their speech. Right? And white people deliberately promoted antagonism between those two groups. About each other. This Bible. But had they paid attention to the fact that they have the same concept, then there are variations. They would have recognized each other as brothers and sisters. And it's the same with us. There's no single way of being an African. There is no single way of being an African. There are certain things that make you an African. But the fact that you have variations from somebody else doesn't make you less an African or that person more an African. We have unity in our diversity. If you study ancient Egypt, the first civilization in the world, you're going to see that the strength of our ancestors there was to bring people with variations together, working for a common purpose, celebrating what was common among them, but yet being proud to observe and celebrate their individual variations from the common core. I hope we talk more about this. But these are the basis of our unity. We have the same history, or very similar history. We have the same culture. We have the same identity. We have the same interests, and therefore our politics must be the same to service those interests. That is Pan-Africanism. So, why do we need Pan-Africanism? Well, we have so-called new ideas and emphasis. You don't need me to explain to you now that we must have an Afrocentric vision of ourselves. We must no longer be taking master eyes to see our own business. We have to stand on our own African feet and look at the world through our own African eyes and see whatsoever is there from our own African points of view. So nothing else will be good enough for us. And we've had 500 years of misery because we failed to come back together, sometimes after genuine struggle. But the fact is, if we don't do this, we'll remain in the ghettos of this world. Afrocentrism, the relocation of our vision of ourselves, our identity, in other words, and the study of ourselves within the entire history and culture of ourselves, the African world. Many of us don't even have an inkling of what our ancestors achieved. We don't. Monesi Keti Asante is chair, or used to be chair of the Department of Africology in Temple University, where I work, and he brought in the idea of Afrocentricity. And I think it would be an important thing to get this text and start reading. And we talk increasingly about Afrofuturism, a future that is built by Africans for Africans. But you cannot build a secure future first if you do not understand your past. You cannot build a secure future if you can't understand your past. And I've given you at least 2 examples of individuals who are confused, don't know who they are. So they go and service the interests of other people. That's a school. So, I hope you know who Shekanta Diop is. Anybody who doesn't know? Okay, Shekanta Diop.
That you said out, man.
No, it's fully.
Get how you're really back to cabinet.
Shekanta Diop. Tell her not to call you, but Shekanta Diop was born in Senegal. And he went to study in France. He is a nuclear physicist, he's a mathematician, linguist, historian, he got some different areas.
Hello, Tapi from Syria.
Yeah. And he presented a dissertation in the Sorbonne in France. And his dissertation argued that ancient Egypt was an African civilization. Now, white people are so racist, and so evil in some aspects of their racism, and so cunning also. They know that they cannot afford for many African people to know and understand that the ancient Egyptians are not the current Egyptians, these are Aryans. But the ancient Egyptians were African people, and these are the people who built the first civilization in the world. In Kemet, they built other civilizations, other places. They said that they went to Africa to Christianize and civilize Africa. Civilization started in Africa. And most of Christianity is what they stole from Africa because they stole it because they don't want to admit that this way together. And anytime you have a year or two to spare, we could talk about that in great detail. Now, they kept rejecting Diop, not because he was incorrect, but because they were racist. Eventually, he brought a whole couple truckloads of artifacts and so on. They said, okay, don't want to say anything about it. And there was a famous conference in Cairo in 1972, I think, I'm not too certain. But it was on the peopling of Africa, the UNESCO General History of Africa. If you want to read, it's not very good, but UNESCO General History of Africa, it's online. At that meeting, Sheikh Anta Diop and his student, Theophilo Benga, wiped the floor with white scholars because they were trying to say that the ancient Egyptian language is not an African language. Right? I know something about that. And there's no way that it is not an African language. You might be shocked. And I'll give you this one. Not going to write it. Good. There's a word in the ancient Egyptian language that white scholars translate as to kill with looks. Could you tell me what it is? To kill with looks? With side-eye. In Guyana, they say kotai, which is a direct translation from tweet in Ghana. And you have different names for it. Yes, the ancient Egyptians were doing that. They were doing many other things. But we don't know. So when I say that our culture is the same culture, and Cain, we could talk at length on this. Right? So, Sheikh Anta Diop is the first person in what you might call modern times to argue this, and he was very successful at it. And again, if you didn't read his books, don't think you know anything about that. Right? So here's what he said. The bonds that we are in the process of re-establishing go far back. Even before the birth of Egyptian civilization. See what I told you? It is that historic bond that unites us and makes the difference. The fact of having lived in the same cradle shaped and transformed us, meaning the first human beings. All of this comes from the first human beings. Instinctively, we have the same sensory response to the same reality. Bynum, the African unconscious, elaborates this. So, for example, we have similar rhythms. And a similar respect for nature, environmentalism. We have the same sense of unity. And this potential for unity is a consequence of our shared history. Do we need anything more about Pan-Africanism? Let me give you another example. Patrice Lumumba. Oh, dear. He needs no introduction. Try. I'm glad I'm correct. I'm glad I got that one right. Despite the boundaries, he says, that separate us, despite our ethnic differences, we have the same conscience, the same soul plunged day and night in anguish, the same wish to make the African continent a free and happy continent that has rid itself of unrest and of fear and of any sort of colonialist domination. I don't want to go into this because I said quite a lot about this before. But I want us to look at the last bullet point there. Africans were Africans long before they were Yoruba or Zulu or even Nigerian, Ghanaian, African Guyanese, African American, etc., etc. It's something we need to understand. Many of us are busy inhabiting little silos of ourselves, and we cut ourselves off from our brothers and sisters and diminish our vision and our strength. We cannot afford to let this happen in the long run. There's a new African and a new Africa at hand. This new Africa will not drop out of the sky. It needs the new African to build it. And the new African will not drop out of the sky either. If we wish to change reality, our reality, we must first of all be determined to change ourselves. Work together. Go and find people and work with them. The major consequence of Arab and European misadventure, oppression, the Holocaust, the Ma'afa in Africa has been the distortion of the African personality. We no longer know who we are. Comes back to that. The new Africa, including the new African world that includes the diaspora, is not possible without the new African at home and abroad. It's not because we don't live physically in Africa that we are not African, and we must not be interested in the affairs of Africa, and we must not be interested in the affairs of other people from the diaspora. I said before that a successful people is a group of people who find ways of working together. The Russians, the Chinese, people from Iran, United States of America, all of them, they have combined those who live outside and those who live inside and work together. They support each other. Why can't we do it? We have more reason from the commonalities I pointed out to work together in Pan-Africanism than they have had. Look what they have achieved. Make certain that we make our time come. So, the new African, including the new African world that includes the diaspora, I want to repeat this, is not possible without the new African. That's us, at home and abroad. The new African will not materialize from nowhere, unaided by African socialization and African education. Know yourself. Start knowing about yourself. Teach your children, cousin, auntie, grandchildren, buy appropriate text for them. You don't have to spend a whole lot of hours teaching. Just at appropriate books. Consider this. What I hate is ignorance. Smallness of imagination. That's the gene. The eye that sees those words have its own lashes. But all things are possible. Who you are is limited only by who you think you are. And many of us have been taught to think that we are nothing. So we never amount to anything. This is a passage from the words of our ancestors in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago. It's available. You could look for Awakening Osiris by a woman called Ellis, Normandy Ellis, a white woman who's done fairly good translation. But it's a beautiful text. It's the words of our ancestors, Awakening Osiris. Okay? And again, the name Osiris, we could talk at length about that. You have Asari in Ghana. It's the same name. Osiris is a Greekified portion of it, but that's another story. So, our ancestors have profound wisdom. Man, if you start reading that stuff, and a lot of it is available in English translation. The translations are not always good, but they're better than that. You know. I don't think that I could end this session without recourse to John Henry Clark, who I see some heads being shaken affirmative, and I'm glad that you agree with me. We need to keep alive this brilliant ancestor, among others. But here's what he said. History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is also a compass that people use to locate themselves on the map of human geography. History tells you where you have been and what you have been. It tells you what you are and where you are. Most importantly, history tells you that where you still must go and what you still must be. Heed the words of the prophet. Prophets, don't forget your history, right? Know your destiny. In the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty. Robert Nesta Marley, Rat Race. Live. Don't be fools. Don't be thirsty in the abundance of water. You live in a society and in an age where you could get a whole lot of information. So what are you doing? How about your little nephews and nieces, your children, grandchildren, neighbors? You're teaching them anything? Our people that live today some of the most vulgar contradictions you could think about. Being African in 2025 shows this contradiction. We're the first people in the world, but everywhere we're third class and second class citizens. We have the longest history, but the poorest memories. Most of us don't know that history. We invented civilization, but we benefit the least from civilization. This is what our continent, Africa, is the richest continent by far, without a doubt. It is the richest ones. But we're the poorest people. Not only in Africa, but wherever we are, we're the poorest people. We do not own the resources of our continent, and we do not own the resources in communities abroad that we live in. We could go on and on about this. The Black Church, so-called, has billions of dollars in this country. Could you point to any huge project that the church is doing? Where do the church bank the money? What do these white bankers do with these billions that poor African American people contribute in tithes into the church? You think they lend it to us, our developers? Now you know why gentrification usually affects our people. The same people who pray hard every Sunday have to sell their homes from the contributions they make. Think about it. We are present in the madhouses of this society, and we are absent from the boardrooms. We where we're not supposed to be, and we are not where we're supposed to be. Change it. Change it. It is a collective task. The Maafa is the two catastrophes that befell our people. The Arab invasion and despoiling of Africa, the imposition of a certain kind of Islam, then the European invasion and despoiling of Africa, and the imposition of a certain interpretation of Christianity. It transmitted inaccurate and demeaning self-image. We know this. They taught us to hate ourselves. Our brother Malcolm has a memorable discourse on that. We have poor or no self-knowledge. We don't know who we are. Because we have poor or no self-knowledge, we have poor or no self-overstanding. Can't understand self. We have no self-love. We have self-hate. We have low or no self-concept. We don't work hard and aim high most times. Because we don't have any of those, our self-confidence is low. And because we don't have big self-confidence, we don't set high goals for ourselves. We set low goals that we could easily achieve. So we have low or no worthwhile life goals. We don't do sustained hard work, smart, aimed at specific goals. And because of all of that, our achievement levels are low. And we confirm the racist stereotype that our oppressors make of us. Now, I know that the mere fact that many of us have got out here today means that we have a lot of difference. This doesn't apply to us, but it applies to too many of our people. Now, we need to understand that. Amen. So, remember the question, who am I? Or who are you? This is a takeoff from the previous slide. If you're really somebody, you'll have self-knowledge. You have a positive image of yourself. You understand yourself. You love yourself. You have a positive concept of who you are. You'll be confident as a person. I could do that. I know I got to work a bit harder, but I'm going to do it. Yeah. You set worthwhile life goals. You know? You work hard and long to reach your goals. You achieve something. And then you destroy the negative self-concept and the vicious circle of disempowerment that has been imposed upon us. Other people put in their virus in our brains, the virus of self-hate and ignorance. And when all of that is done, development happens of the South, the family, the community, and the nation. And that's all that. Again, that's the same slide, but in a slightly different wording. Remember the future. And remember the future. And the future we build is an African future, an Afro future. That's why you hear people talking about African futurism. Remember the future, because if you have no memory of your people's progress through space and time, you have no future also. So let us make certain that we have a future, an African future. Thank you very much.